Video được Việt hóa bởi Ngọc Tân từ group tài nguyên dựng phim. Nghiêm cấm các hành vi lít về rồi bán cho thằng khác. Mọi ý kiến đóng góp xin gửi về Facebook Quỳnh Ngọc Tân.
Let's take a look at the interface of the cut page. As we keep going through the interfaces for the different pages, you're going to find more and more in common. So the things that are definitely in common with the media and edit pages are we have the media pool right here. And this works again, just like the media pool always does. And we have our viewer over here. We also have our trusty inspector right here, and we can open that just like we do on the edit page. And behind our media pool here, we have our different sections for our transitions, our titles, and our effects. And these work just like the effects panel in the edit page. They're just kind of laid out in tabs instead of in a little menu. Behind our media pool, we have the sync bin, which we're going to get into in a minute. But those are pretty much the panels for the top of the screen. In the lower half of the screen, we have our timelines. Now, it might seem weird that we have timelines, like 2 timelines. So what in the world are these and what do they do? Well, these are 2 different views of the same timeline. And this is actually the same timeline that we had in our edit page. If we switch over to the edit, this is what we're looking at in the cut page. It's just kind of a different way of looking at it. This top timeline is our entire edit from beginning to end, and it's all the way zoomed out. So the very left-hand side of this window is the very first frame of our edit, and the very right-hand side is the last frame. And so our entire project is stretched from left to right here, which means that we can quickly jump to any place in our project by just clicking anywhere here in the timeline. Down below, we have our lower timeline, and that is a zoomed in view of this same timeline. So the idea is that you can navigate throughout your entire media with this upper timeline. And then if you want to make a change, get a little bit more detailed, you can mess with it down here in the lower view. You can think of this upper timeline as having like a world map, and you can look at the whole world all at once. And then down below, you have a magnifying glass to really look at the tiny little details. The reason it's laid out like this is for speed. The cut page is really designed to allow you to move really quickly when you're putting together an edit. And these timelines are part of that whole philosophy. If we look at the edit page, and let's say we want to go to this orange clip, and then we want to adjust it, we have to zoom in, and then we can adjust it, and then we have to zoom back out to go anywhere. So there's like 3 or 4 steps there to just making one adjustment. In the cut page, the idea is that we can click where we're supposed to go, and then we're automatically already zoomed in so we can make our adjustment.
Video được Việt hóa bởi Ngọc Tân
So
từ
each time
group
that
tài
you do
nguyên dựng
that,
phim.
it saves you just a couple seconds, and those seconds add up. A couple things that are a little bit weird about how these timelines work. This upper timeline, the playhead moves back and forth, and the lower timeline, it's fixed. So you're kind of moving the playhead in the upper timeline, and you're moving the timeline under the playhead with the lower timeline. Now you can actually turn this off. If you go to kind of the middle left side here of our screen, you can unclick lock playhead, and that will switch to free playhead mode, and you can move this back and forth like this. Now, I don't particularly like working this way because if we have the playhead here, we have both of the playheads moving and they're moving at different speeds, and it's just kind of distracting for me. So if you're used to using the playhead and moving that back and forth, you can do that with free playhead. If you want to lock it, you can go to locked playhead. So it does take a little bit of getting used to, but I really like to work that way. Another thing to mention about the timelines, you can adjust clips here in the lower timeline, but you can also adjust them in the upper timeline. It's not just a map of where to go, but you can actually make your edits, move things around, and do everything just kind of in a zoomed out view here in the upper timeline as well. So depending on what kind of changes you want to make, it might be better to work in the upper or lower timeline. Next part of the interface, it actually has to do with this viewer. Down in the lower left-hand corner of the viewer, there's this little icon. You can click on that and that will open up our tools. Now the tools are basically the same controls as are in the inspector. They're just kind of all laid out here where it's easy to find them visually. And again, it's all about speed. So you can kind of keep these tools up. And if you don't have anything selected, whatever you're over here in the timeline, you can adjust really quickly. Again, this is all for speed, right? So you can go through and reframe all of your shots just using the tools, and you don't have to worry about clicking in this, open the inspector, and adjusting things. These are kind of more on-screen tools. There are also a few little quick effects, sort of the most common things that you would need to adjust. Again, all for speed. Things like adjusting clip speed. You can kind of do a quick time remap. You can stabilize a shot if it's shaky. There's lens correction. There's even things like auto color correction, which for the record doesn't generally work very well. And you can quickly adjust clip volume. So all of this stuff isn't really super detailed, but it is really quick. So if you want to make a quick and dirty edit, this is like the fastest way to do it. It's also worth noting that we don't have two viewers. We only have this one viewer. And this will switch between your source and your timeline depending on what you have selected. So I can go up here to these breadcrumbs and open Chapter 6 cut page media, and I can double click on any of these clips and preview them here. Or if I click down in the timeline, that will show me what's in the timeline. And so those switch out. That works a lot like the single viewer mode here in the edit page, same kind of thing. So the entire interface in the cut page is just really slimmed down so that you can do everything kind of all on one screen for the most part. And they've kind of done their best to try and hide things that we don't need to mess with for a simple project and expose the things that we do need to mess with. So we'll get into more of the details here in the rest of this chapter, but that's a good overview of the interface of the cut page.